Now we're going to hop back over to PHP and see if we can actually connect to this database that we've set up. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, let's minimize. Oh no, we're fine with that. First of all, I'm going to have another file. Let's create a new file. I'm going to call this one index3. So file, save as, index3.php. And remember that when we need to see this file, we need to fully specify on the address line there. So I'm going to create in PHP a connection to the database. And if I establish a connection, that's fantastic. That means I can then use it. If I can't establish a connection, I know I've got a fair amount of work to go back to, and it's probably going to be along with this create the user from the command line. So hopefully things will work out. So I'm going to start my PHP tags. Let's just separate a few lines. And basically this is going to be a template. You know, once you've written it once, you can use it in all sorts of different situations. There's very little you'll need to change. The PHP that you're going to see is going to look rather complicated and complex, because we're not only using PHP, we're also using SQL in there, and we've got a few new items of PHP to learn, particularly about data types. But however, for this video, this file is basically going to be the standard way of connecting to a database. I'm going to take you through it slowly and show you one or two different things with it. The first thing I'm going to do is set up some variables. I'm going to set up 4 variables. The first one's going to be called the server, and if you remember that this server is on something called localhost. We set the user as localhost. What that's going to mean is that all your PHP files and all your websites, they're going to be stored on the same computer, which is the local host, as the database. And so we just need to say that the server is this. The next thing I'm going to set up is the username, and we're going to set it to the username that we created on the table. Bad idea here is to use root, because that will give access to just about everything. And then we're going to set up a password. We don't need to do this, and I'll show you a method shortly where you don't. The password that we set on the table or the database was WPS. And finally we're going to say which database. Now at the moment we are looking at all of the tables, or all of the databases, sorry, that are here. But we need to specify exactly which database, which is the WPS one, that we're going to be using. Okay, so we can really restrict access WPS. Now if anybody was watching that, you may have noticed that I made mistakes. This is PHP, so every single line needs to end with a semicolon. Okay, now that's not necessary. It does help you quickly see or quickly change things at a later time. It's no big deal, but this next line is the one that is going to connect to the database, and it's going to use the variables I've just created. Normally people just write db or con. You'll see that if you're looking at somebody else's code. What I'm going to do is just use a full word such as connection. It'd be better if I spelt it correctly. Connection equals, and we are using something called MySQL I. Now that's quite important, because if you're looking at other YouTube videos or other tutorials or reading other books, the older version was just MySQL, and that was all you needed, and you might see the books showing that. And as you can see, there's lots of MySQLs down here. However, this is a different version that you've installed on your machines, and if all of you have installed it recently, then the version you'll be needing is MySQL I. So everywhere where you see MySQL, you need to put the I on the end, but then whatever follows it is just the same. So that's MySQL connect, and I need to pass it some parameters. Now this is the reason why I used variable names up here, so you can see the order in which they're passed. The first one is the server. So the first variable you need to pass is the server, then the username, then you need to pass the password, and finally you need to say which database. Now some of these are not needed, particularly the end ones. If you miss out the database, you can specify that later. If you miss out the password, you can specify that later. Generally you'll just log into all of them at the same time. Depending on your application that you're using, you might actually want somebody to log in or somebody to choose a different database. Up to you. But that is the order. Now I didn't need to use variables. I could have just put localhost there. So I could have written localhost, and I could have written WPS, WPS and WPS in each one of these fields. That would be fine, and a quick way, in other words saving you 4 lines of typing. But it's not necessary. This is just as good. So if I replace it with server, in fact this may be a little bit better, because if you're going to change anything you just need to change it at the top. So if I have a different database such as home, I just need to change that, and I could have a different user and different password. I'm just changing it in one place. So that is setting up a variable to hold the connection information for the database, so it knows where to look, which computers look at, who the username is, what the password is, and which database we're looking for. So all we need to do now is connect. Now I'm going to try and explain this one to you. First of all, we're going to check it out. We're going to have an if statement, a selection. So we're going to say if we're successful, great, we'll connect to the database. If not, get me out of here. It's going to work like this. If, this is fairly standard, if not, connection. Okay, so if we can't connect, that is saying essentially, okay, what we need to do is, it's a bit drastic, die. Okay, that means kill the database, you know, just don't connect, don't try anything, and just drop straight out of the program on this line. Don't execute anything else in this script. So there could be loads of lines beneath it, but it's going to stop right at this point where dying. Die. Now I can give it some parameters to help me know what went wrong. So I'm going to type in here connection failed. Okay, connection failed, and what I'm going to do is join it with a string that is passed back from the database as to why the connection failed. It might be the fact that the user doesn't exist, or the password is incorrect, or the database doesn't exist. Some reason will be passed back, and I can decide to print that out. My SQL I, which is a function call, not too many I's in there, and connect error. That will return from the database the reason why it could not connect. Okay, so that line, all it does is tries to log on or tries to connect to the database, and if it doesn't, it just kills the script at that line. However, if you can log on, that's great, that's what we want. All I'm going to do is just specify it on the screen so that I know I've actually managed to connect. Connected successfully. Okay, so that's it. That's our first piece of script to connect to the database. We're going to test that out, and probably we're going to see what happens if we get things wrong. So I'm going to save this file, file save, and then I'm going to load it up. Now remember, it's a localhost sandbox. Hopefully I stored it in that place. Index3.php. Now if we can connect to the database, we should see connected successfully. We're on our way. If we can't, we've got some work to do. Oh, we can't. So we did actually. We've got an undefined constant assumed connection. Okay, so I made a mistake on line 9. again, we did not tell me that I'd made that mistake. This is when you hop between Python and PHP. You need to remember that variables in PHP have a $sign in front of them. So if I just zoom that again, there we go, connected successfully. We've lost that error message. Before I stop this and move on to the next part, I want to show you what happens if we sort of type in the wrong password. So WPS1, for example. So if I save that and then reload this page, there you go. We get an error message. It can't. The majority of times you'll receive this message: access denied for user WPS at localhost using password yes. It's never going to tell you what the password is. It's just going to either say yes or no. But this is a big clue to what's going on. And again, if you don't see this WPS at localhost, if you've got WPS at some other, it's not another computer, but if you've got the percentage symbol there, that's telling you that you never set the user to be on this particular computer. You need to go back and change that either through the command line or back in PHP MyAdmin. So that is working nicely. Actually, let's just try one or two more out. Let's just try the username. There we go. Save it. Reload. I think pretty much we'll get the same message. There we go. Let's try changing the database so that the database doesn't exist. So you can see all these different messages. There you go. You can look at those at your leisure. And let's say if we got the server name wrong, what would happen there? Well, that's decided to take a while to say that we haven't got a database at all. So that's the message you're going to get if these parameters are incorrect. So if any of these are incorrect, it's going to run this line and then kill the script, print out the error message. And if we're okay and we can connect to it, so we can play around with it, we can just type out connected successfully. Another error that I made there, which I made in a previous video, which I want to explain now, is the very last line of your PHP statement is the only line that you do not need a semicolon at the end. I got away with that there. I didn't notice it, but it was the last line, so that was fine. Generally put the semicolon in, even if it's not needed, if it's the last line of the actual script. So that will stop any errors occurring later that you'll find difficult to debug. There we go. Let's just make sure we can still connect. Yeah, we connect successfully.